Okay, so I just want to announce that today's broadcast is being sponsored by our Bensi Benchen family, by Ilu Nishmis, by Isha Rachel Bas Lovan. All of our mothers, the Ilu Nishmis Rachel Bas Lovan, whose yahrzeit was yesterday. May the Neshama have an aliyah, and may she continue to cry, as Reb Chaim Shmulevitz says, to bring us soon to the Geula. Zog the Heilige Gemara, Tor B'Tamei Noiser Upigol also. What happens if someone says Harei Olai Kivosar Ziv Cheshlamim La'achas Rikas Domim Mahu? Someone said that this kikar should be usher to me, just like the status of Bosar Ziv Cheshlamim after his rika, which is Mutar La'achila. Zok to Gemara, if you said that, surely there's no nether here. Idika Amr V'Hadei Lishna V'Heter Kamatvis. Surely he is comparing it to Heter. Ella, the shaila that Rami Bar Chama is asking is a different shaila, where Kegoyin the Machis Basar Zivche Shlomim. He has a piece of Shlomim sitting here on the table, and this Shlomim is Basar Shlomim after this Rika. So it's Shlomim that's mutter to eat. Umachis the Heter Gabe, and he has a piece of Heter side by side with it, and the Rishonim speak out that that's not necessary. It could be anywhere. He's just saying that whatever it is, the kikar, the musr, whatever he has, should be just like this piece of meat, pointing to the zivchei shalom. This should be like that. What is his intention, which is how most of Rishonim learn? What is his intention? When he's pointing to the basar shlomim, does he mean this actual basar shlomim, or does he mean where this shlomim comes from, where it started from, that it was a shlomim? And that's what he's referring to, which would be usr as a davar haneder, because before this rika, this meat was usr and it was a davar haneder, and therefore whatever he's saying should be like this will be usr because of a nether. Or is he referring to the issue that exists on this piece of meat basher husham, which there is no isser on it, and therefore there's no isser on this nether. And the Ran, of course, speaks out that even though there's an Isser Tuma, and there might even be an Isser on the parts that the Kohanim eat, there's an Isser to Yisraelim, the Ran says unequivocally that would not be considered a Dover Hanoder, that those are not Isurim that stem from his nether. Once the Zrikas Adam is complete and the Basar becomes mutter, any residue of the nether is completely gone. And any Isser that comes now has to be a new Isser. And that's not a Dover Hanider, that would be a Dover Haser. So Amar Rabbi said, I have a Pasha to Raya. Toshma. In our Mishnah, we have cases that are after the Zrikas Adam. You were matvis in something after the Zrikas Adam, and in fact, it was Aser, such as the cases of the Mishnah. Noiser Upigel, which Noiser is where the cash is from, which is surely La'achar Zrikas Adam. The noiser, and the round says pigel is not part of the kasha. But noiser pigel la'akar drikadamu. Noiser is only you leave over the meat longer than you're supposed to. So noiser pigel la'akar drikadamu. And yet, when you're matmas in noiser, it still is considered isser. Why don't you say over there, just like Rabbi Bachama wants to say that maybe it's considered matmas the davar ha'aser. Zok Gemara. A big chiddush bin noiser shel oila. We're speaking about the noiser of an oila, where there is never any heter to eat any of the meat. The noiser of the oila, in fact, would be an isser of a davar hanoder. I just want to pause here for a second because I think this is a massive, massive chiddush. Let's see the Ran. The noiser upigol la'akers rikas damahu. Is the loy garshi pigol. There are those who aren't garish pigol. Shari mikivin shenis pagel. Once there's a kavanah of pigel and the carbon becomes pigel, ein zrikasi matirosai. This rika will never be matira, so it remains completely aser. So it's not relevant, the whole shaila, that there's a status where it's mutter to eat.
That's if the pigel became before this rika.
Where else could the pigel could be? The pigel could be the rika. Right. So then, so there was never a heter to eat the meat after this rika. So there's never an option to be matvis b'davar aser in such a case. The Isser Nidre, Pakaloi B'Zrikas Dam. At this Rika, the Isser Nether evaporated, and now there's a time where it's mutter and ganzen, and now you can declare, am I pointing to its status now, or am I pointing to its original status? It's nan, the Aser Alma Be'ikrik. And for the Gemara, we're speaking about the type of noiser where there was never a heter. For noiser shalayla, that feel tim shalomer the has to come matvis, even if you're going to say that it's being matvis in now, akati nidra lepaka, the nidra didn't go away. The oila asura afilu la'achas rika. The oila remains also even la'achas rika. Now, this is a massive chiddush because let's break this apart for a second. The Iser Noiser itself. Let's take a Basar Shlomim. Basar Shlomim that you left to become Noiser, and it became Noiser. That Meshur is considered a Dover also, not a Dover neither. Because we're saying once this Rika was mattered a Basar Lachila, any shemet, any remnant of the Iser that came from that is gone, and even though now there's a new Iser of Noiser, that's considered a new Iser, and it's not called Matmas B'Dover another. Yet, the same Iser Noiser, and when it applies to an Oila, that is Dover another. I don't understand. Maskim is still a Dover another because the Oila remains Osir. But the Iser Noiser Shaboy is not an Iser that comes from another. The Harayah, that same Iser Noiser by the Shlomim is called Dover Osir. So you have to say that when someone's matbis in Noiser Shal Oila, it's not actually the Noiser Isser that he's being matbis on, it's the carbon that he's being matbis on. Because otherwise, the Isser Noiser, the Ram is saying, is a new Isser that the Ramil is. Okay? Zog to Gemara.
The reason is because by the Shlomim it could go away. So that's
the
why.
Isser could go.
The later goes away, so Kim Tanofanai is due the oil never went away.
That's right, but it's not Noiser really that being matbis.
Because
but that's the next more Shasha. Zog to Gemara, again, listen to Basar Oila. What's not this one Noiser? The Mishnah's case should have been B'Basar Oila, because the whole part is you want to be matbis in the Isser, which is a Dover another. Zok to Ran, Im Kain listening to B'Basar Oila, Amut Bishlam with the Lav Ba'Oila Mari. Bishlam, you're going to say that the Mishnah, when it says Noiser, is not referring to Kabbalah Oila. Nakat Noiser, why did the Mishnah Chapa Noiser, Lashmina, and the Be'ikra Kamatbis? To tell us a Chiddush that it's not the Isser Noiser that is really being typhus, he's being typhus on the carbon before this Rika. If we're speaking about an oila, Myra Busa the Noiser. What does Noiser have anything to do with this? Akata Nidra Lepaka. The etzem nether on the carbon that made it in the carbon in the first place. That Isser is still here. Because that's really what it is. You're being matpis b'basar oila, you're not being matpis on Noiser. Happens to be Noiser. Ulefi mashna pi rashni b'mishnah seinu. If you remember in the Mishnah, we said something that's be'etzem Isser, you don't need a chafadimian. For Yerushalayim, you need ki Yerushalayim, ki Imer, ki Dir, ki Ishim. But you didn't need that for Pigel. Bedinu the Lishnili, the Gemara could have answered, the Lahaki Tani Nicer Pigel, the Loy Tani B'Basar Oila is Lashmina and the Bahani Afilu B'Loy Chafadimian Mitzer. Really, the Gemara could have answered, the reason why it's Chapta Noiser, not Basar Oila, is because that's the point the Gemara wants to show that you don't need a Chavadimim. Ela Dadif Feminei, Shani Lei, the Gemara is going to have even a better terrace than that. Zok the Gemara, Loi Mi Boi Kamar. The Mishnah is trying to tell you a greater Chiddush. Loi Mi Boi Basar Oila the Aser. It's partial that regular Basar Oila is Aser. Why? The other carbon kamatvis, he's specifically identifying the carbon of Isser Hanoder that he wants to be matvis for his nether. But Noiser Pigel, the Oila, it's Trichalik. But the Chiddush is that the Noiser and Pigel, which are Isurim, that come on the Dover another, that's the Chiddush. So Kedai Tachamina, Ki Isser Noiser, Ki Isser Pigel, Vavle Kematis B'Dover Asur V'Lemitzor. You might think when he says Noiser, he means the Isser of Noiser, which is not a Dover another. That's only a Dover Asur. Kamash Malon, that if he's talking about an Isser, a Dover Asr, but it's on an Oila, which is a Dover another, we'll say that that's like your Matis and a Dover another. That's a big Kiddush, because the word that I actually said doesn't qualify for me to be Matis. It's regular Isser. But yet, since we're talking about an object that has on it an Isser of a Dover another, that's considered Matis the Dover another.
This is an eye to what we learned before. And everything that we can happen somewhere that is the essence, we're going there because he's saying words and probably what he's saying he means to.
He means it over another, even though he says the word noiser. But it's more than that. the fact that he chapta noiser makes it that you don't need a chavadimian, even though the isser that he's quoting is not the right isser, but it's enough that you don't need a chavadimian. Very interesting how we're twisting ourselves into a pretzel to make these lashonis work. That's why. Right. That's why you need a mission to tell you this klap yo, this klap nish. Okay. Meisvei. What do you mean meisvei? Do we not have a shaila here? Shouldn't it be tashma? So once again, lashon nedarim mashuda, because really it should say tashma.
Word receiving could be also the answer.
No, I understand, but normally you don't find that word, right? Normally, yeah. Okay, so let's see what the Gemara says. Ezo Isser. Oh, this is a fascinating raya that the Gemara is going to bring out. Ezehu Isser ha'amar b'Torah. Let me just move something away from my screen. It's getting in my way. Okay, Meisvei. Ezehu Isser ha'amar b'Torah. Amar. If someone said Hareini shaloi oichel basar v'shaloi eshte yayin kiyom shemeis boy ovid. I'm not going to eat. So let's stop. Ezo Isser, which is referring to a neder, Amar b'Torah. This is a neder. Omar, he said, Hareini shaloi oichel basar v'shaloi eshte yayin. Doesn't that sound like a shvua? Isn't the neder saying this is osir upon me? So right away, this is very fair. Ezo Isser is trying to identify what a neder is, and what do? We describe a shvua. So if you remember, this is the Gemara that the Ran on Daf Beis brought a raya from, that even if you said, well, the Ran had a shaila about this. In his first Ran, he said that if you say neder b'lashon shvua or shvua b'lashon neder, it will not work. Correct, Ran, over here, clearly you're doing a neder b'lashon shvua, and it does work. Zok Ran, this Gemara is lav davka. We're just trying to show how a tfasa works, so we're not focusing on the syntax of how the Isser is being expressed, and it's using a lashon shvua, but it really means a lashon neder. That's what the Ran says on Daf Beis. But the Ran brings the Ramban, who says avada, even a lashon neder, a neder could be done by lashon shvua, and the shvua could be done by lashon neder. How does it work? Zok the Ramban. It works as a yad, just like a yad. You could complete his words and make it into a proper neder with the proper syntax. So too, even though a shavua and a neder are not expressed in the right fashion, using yad, it would make it into a neder. That was the first Ran. It was a Ran on the Mishnah that we had all the way to the beginning of the Masechta. Now it comes to life because we're actually learning the Gemara that the Ran was bringing a raya from. So there is Amar b'Torah. Amar Hareini shelo oichel basar. I won't eat basar. V'shelo yesh yayin. I won't drink wine. Kiyom shemeis be'aviv, like the day his father died.
And that's the day of time.
Oh, so that's what we're going to discuss. Is Yom Shemeis Be'aviv a day of Tanis? Or maybe it's the day of the Kfura. So somebody once wrote a shaila to the Trumas Hadeshin, and he asked the Trumas Hadeshin, when is the day that we should fast? When is the day that, no, his shaila is, when should you say Baruch Hu and Kaddish? When should you say Baruch? In other words, when should I hold the day of the Yortzeit? Should it be on the Yom HaKfura, the anniversary of the Yom HaKfura, or should it be on the anniversary of the Yom Hamisa? And the Trumas Hadeshin said there are those who want to falsely bring a raya that it's the Yom HaKfura. And where do they bring a raya from? From a Gemara in Soita. The Gemara in Soita tells us that when they came to bury Yaakov Avinu in the Marav Machpelah, Esau was there to say, hey, Yaakov doesn't own this property, I own this property. And they sent Naphtali to run and get the Shtar Choiv that proved ownership of the property to Yaakov. In the meantime, Chushim ben Dan was there, and if I'm not mistaken, this story happened on Zois Chanukah. Chushim ben Dan was there, and he didn't hear the conversation. He just sees someone obstructing the burial of his grandfather, being Mavaz HaMeis, that's standing there in the sun, and this guy's not letting. So he didn't ask any questions. He just chopped off Esav's head, and it's brought down that this happened on Zois Chanukah, and Chushim are the same letters that spell the word Mashiach. So Chushim and Dan, so Zois Chanukah is a today that's Masula for Gula. So the Gemara says, and Esav's head rolled into the Marav Machpelah, and that's what Rachel said when she said Lama Eshkal Shnechem B'Yom. No, that's what Rivka meant when she said Lama Eshkal Shnechem B'Yom Echad. So you see that the death is the day of the Kfura, because Yaakov had died long before that. Zok Trumas edition, you're bringing me a rye from Loma Eshkal to what the day of the Yortzeit is. That is no shaykhis. Avada, the day of the Yortzeit is Kiyom Shemeis B'Yovav, and he brings a rye from our Gemara that the day of the Yortzeit is always Kiyom Shemeis B'Yovav. So right off the bat, you can't be matnus in Yom Shemeis B'Yovav if there's a minute to fast, because that's not a davar hanother, that's a davar aser. So where is there a davar hanother here? So let's read through the cases, and then the Gemara is going to clarify how this works. So Areni Shlo Echel Boser, this Shlo Yashte Yayin, Kiyom Shemeis B'Yovav, or Kiyom Shemeis B'Rabbi, or the day his Rebbe died. Oh, I cannot resist my favorite story. You're supposed to fast on the day that your Rebbe dies? Really? Maybe you're supposed to make a l'chaim, right? So there's a famous story with the Beis Halevi who was traveling through the countryside, and he found himself one morning for Shachris in a Hasidic shtibel. And right after Shachris, they brought out l'chaim, they brought up the leikach, the mezonis, they were singing and dancing. So they said, "What's going on here? Is there bar mitzvah today? Is there a simcha today?" So they said, "What do you mean? It's the Hachim Plot Rebbe's Yurtzat today." So he says, "I don't understand. When you have a Rebbe who dies, so his Yurtzat is a day of celebration. By us, we do Mishnayos and we fast, we say Kaddish, and by you it's a party." But you know what? Come to think of it, the Beis Halevi said, this same kasha I have under Dor Deya, the Dor HaMidbar. Because when the Satan showed Klal Yisrael that Moshe Rabbeinu was dead, it says, "Vayikumu l'tzachek." They started the party. Yet, when Moshe Rabbeinu really died at the end of his life, Klal Yisrael sat ba'avelis 30 days. So what is it? The Dor Deya alone, they were mixed up. The text is very simple. When they saw Moshe died and they partied, that was before Matan Torah. Before Matan Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu's blows gevein abal moifis. He made Kriyas Yamsuf, he made Ted Bakis. No, abal moifis a rebel as a vet. You could make a l'chaim, you could party. But after Matan Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu gevein a Rosh Hashiva. They can learn Torah. Oh, for that you need a veilus. So that's it. So I'll call upon him, but on a serious note, you find first of all Lag Boimer become a huge party. Lag Boimer is not associated with fasting; it's associated with partying. That only started in the days of the Arizal. So the Bnei Yisachar says it's very pashut shot. By Moshe Rabbeinu, you know why there's a veilus? Because when Moshe Rabbeinu died, thousands of halachas were lost from Klal Yisrael, were forgotten. That's a place to be misabel. But when no, I can't believe I forgot whose yard is on Lag Boimer. Oh, if Shimon Yochai died, there was a huge galus of Torah. There's a huge galus of Torah. That's why there's a simcha. So sure, if there's a hasgalus, then avad it's a mokum simcha. If it's not if there's no hasgalus at the time, then it's not a mokum simcha. And then he says, why do we fast on the day of our side? There's actually two different sources. One is called Yakir the Chai, one is Yakir the Moisi. Either we know every person is judged again on the day of his yard side, so we're fasting out to do tefillah, to daven for the good of the neshama. On the other hand, the Gemara tells us that the day of the yard side is a day where this family had din. So it's a day of kitrik for that family. So it's Yakir the Chai. We have to fast and do tshuva so that we should have a kapara, we shouldn't have to suffer anymore. Okay, so let's see the Gemara Vayter. So that's Kiyom Shemeis B'Yabbai. And then there's Kiyom Shenereg Gedalia ben Achikam. Who knows what day Gedalia ben Achikam was killed? Not on time Gedalia. It was on Rosh Hashanah, right? It was on Rosh Hashanah. And who killed him? Yishmael killed him. It was an inside job. He was killed by friendly fire. Well, it wasn't friendly. He was a double crosser. He was a treasonous. That's right. So what happened was Yishmael, they warned Gedalia that Yishmael was a danger. Yishmael was angry that the Nebuchadnezzar appointed Gedalia as the interim ruler, and they warned him that Yishmael is going to kill you. But he said, "No, I'm not Makabel Shnor. I'm not Makabel Shnor. He's the Elachid." And in the meantime, he took him in, he entertained him, they ate together, and Yishmael killed him. So we always wonder. There's 4 months that are associated with Churban Bayis where we fast, because when the Navi tells us to fast, the Navi doesn't specify a day in a month; it just specifies a month. So we set up the fast of Tzom Gedalia on on Sunday the day after Rosh Hashanah, because we're not going to fast on Rosh Hashanah. So there's two issues. First of all, as a riddle, how could you have 5 days in a row of Kriyas Torah without any halal? So it's not like a Yom Tov we have halal. 5 days of Kriyas Torah, consecutive days without halal. So the answer is if Rosh Hashanah falls out on a Friday, because Thursday you lane, Friday and Shabbos you're going to lane because it's Rosh Hashanah and Shabbos, right? Sunday you're going to lane because it's Tzad Gedalia, and Monday you're going to lane because Monday's a day laning. So you have 5 days in a row of laning without having any halal. Well, Kol Panim, why is Tzad Gedalia associated with Tshuva, with Asher Shemei Tshuva? So there's a Rav Nebenzahl. I don't know who that is. You ever heard of a Rav Nebenzahl? Who's that? Oh, he's the Chazal. So he said a very. So he said over a very beautiful word. He said over that the Yetzer Hara gets us in two ways. The Chavetz Chaim says this. It's brought down in Meshul Shashorim. One of the ways the Yetzer Hara gets us, and he can't get us to do Nevera, what he tries is he tries to be machshel us with a mitzvah. The Chavetz Chaim is pointing to a pasuk. I forgot where the pasuk is, but it says that the Satan is biyaminoi. Normally the Satan is always besmoilov, but the Satan is biyaminoi. So the Chavetz Chaim says if the Yetzer Hara is having trouble, he can't get someone to be nichshol. So what will he do? He'll get a guy to do mitzvahs, sit and learn a whole night, and who knows what a shachris the next morning is going to look like, right? So he gets him with a mitzvah, and the person thinks he's doing a mitzvah when really he's doing something that's inappropriate. So here, that was the Aveira of Gedalia ben Achikam. He taked it in Aveira. Why? Because it says that if someone tells you Lashon Hara, you shouldn't believe it. But Lamecha Shmiya Boy, and he wanted to do a big mitzvah. Chas v'sholom, no, I'm not a kabul. Lamecha, I'm not doing a Lamecha Shmiya Boy, and that's why he got killed. So Zokib Nebenzahl, what's the avoid of Tzom Gedalia? Sure, look at your verse from the Tshuva. Now you have to look at your mitzvahs and make sure that your mitzvahs are ganze mitzvahs, and none of your mitzvahs are mitzvahs that the Yetzer Hara are bringing you to do. Your mitzvahs have to be pure as well. Okay, what if he says, so I want to fast like one of those days. So what was exactly the case? Because these, at their face value, are not being matras b'davar another, they're being matras b'davar aser. Well, Amar Shmuel explained, here's the situation. How does it work? That's only if, in addition to being his father's yortzeit, he had prior made a neder of that day. So he's being matvis not on the Isser of that day, but on the neder that he already made for that day.
He made a neder that he's not going to eat.
Right. So let's see the Ram.
Not everybody fasts.
No, not everybody has that many. So let's see the Gemara. V'hu shenodar v'oisei yom kasol kadaitach zok tehelig aran. We're on the second wide line. Kasol kadaitach shenodar v'oisei yom shemeis aviv shelo yoichel basar. He made a neder on that day that his father died, that he won't eat basar. V'chein nodar pa'am achas. So he already made a neder one day not to eat shelo yoichel basar b'yom shemeis by Gedalia. So all of these days that we're talking about, we're not referring to the base Isser that people fast on that day. Rather, he made a neder for those days. So let's say in 1970, he made a 1970. His father's yortzeit was Rosh Chodesh El, Sunday morning Rosh Chodesh El. What? Why? Okay, okay, fine. It was Gimel El Sunday morning in 1972, and that day that his father died, he made another. He wasn't going to eat that day, right? And now 40 years later, he didn't fast in between. 40 years later, again it came out that Sunday morning should be Gimel El, and it's his father's yortzeit, and he makes the neder, and he's matvis the neder that he had made earlier. V'achshav matvis yom achar ki oisei yom, and he wants to say, I want this day to be also like the day that my father died. The kivan the neder b'meikara. Since, sure, there were many Gimel Elul between the death of my father and today, where I didn't have a nether and I didn't fast, but I said I'm making a nether like that day. So am I referring to this any day, or am I referring to the Iker, to the original day of the nether where there was a nether there? So Havalahash the matbis b'davar another. By referring to that original day where there was a nether there, then there's a davar another. So Zok the Gemara as follows: V'Amar Shmuel Who should nodar ba'isayoi? Heichadami. So what are the specifics of the case? Lav going to koi bechad b'Shabbos the misbeh. He's holding 30 years later on that same day that his father died, and he wants to be matbis on to ask for this day from a previous such day. Now he's just saying kiyom shemeis b'Yavah. So there were 30 yorsites where he didn't make that neder. So when he says kiyom b'Yavah, does it mean the original meis b'Yavah, the ikr, like when you bring matbis a carbon, you're going back to the beginning, to the source, or maybe he means one of the other years where, of course, there was no isser. So heichadami lav the koi b'chad b'Shabbat the misbeh avua the avagav dika tuva chad b'Shabbat the etera. Even though there are many years of this same day with heter where no nether was made, yet we say that his kavana is the ikr the katani aser shemami na beikr hu matbis. You see that when someone is matbis on something, he doesn't refer to what you see in front of your eyes. He's referring to the original isser that was on it when he made the neder many years ago. Let's see the heilige Rab.
One thing that Schoedishnis made me on, that's I took the time to read them,
That's what he says.
Die ganze Chodesh ist Rosh Chodesh, wie alle anderen.
Very nice. The koi b'chad b'Shabbos, the misbeh avua. Nira be'enai, the haki perusha. Sho'imer b'yoyim echad b'Shabbos, shehu b'yoyim shemeis b'Yovev, l'mini chadoshim. He said on one Sunday, Punk, that was his father's yahrzeit. B'yoyim echad b'Shabbos doesn't mean on Sunday, it means one day of the week. I picked Sunday. Sho'imer b'yoyim echad b'Shabbos, shehu b'yoyim shemeis b'Yovev, l'mini chadoshim. To go in. Echad b'Shabbos rishon shel Nisan, a day in the first week of Nisan. Hey yom ze alai, this day should be to me Kiyoim echad b'Shabbos rishon shel Nisan, should be like the first Sunday of the week of Nisan. Zokteran the avagav the ikatuva chad b'Shabbos deter. Even though there were many such days in his life that there was no Isser, there was only one way back when that was Osir. The Katani Osir, nevertheless, according to Shmuel, there's an Isser here. You see from here, the psyche of a person, when he refers to a day, he refers to the original Isser of that day. And the Gemara at this point feels the Bahachi Askinan, that is the case. If he specifically refers to that original day where there's a neder, and not just to this general day where there were many of them, where there was no neder, rather, if we're referring if he says specifically, I'm referring to the actual day of my father's yahrzeit, well, that's pshit to the mitzvah. For that, I don't need Shmuel to tell me a chiddush that it's usher. That's a classic case, textbook case of davar another. And levada, it must be in the case where it was a little bit vague. This day should be for me today like the first Sunday of Nisan. But I don't specify which first Sunday I'm referring to. So it could mean any of the recent ones where there was no Isser, or it could mean the original ones where there was Isser. The Kamash Malon and the Chiddush is even though we could say that I'm referring to one of the many days that had no Isser on it. Since he's standing today on the yahrzeit of his father. And he said that today should be like my father's yahrzeit. The ikre matvis, he means the original first day where there was a nether, the usher, and it will be usher. So you have a raya to one side in Rami B'chama Shaila that if I say that my kikar should be usher, like this piece of shlamim lachash rika, my intention is not like the piece of meat b'asher usham, rather the ikar, like the carbon shlamim that it came from when it was originally usher because of a neder. Zoktumar, you don't have a raya. The Shmuel hachi itmar. We can learn Shmuel differently. Omar Shmuel v'hu shenadar uba ma'oisayom ve'elach. Shmuel might have meant to say that it's speaking where every single yahrzeit, since that original yahrzeit that he asked himself, every single one was awesome. So then I'm not being matras. You don't have a right that I'm being matras in the ikr. Any way I slice it or dice it, if I'm being mappers in the ikar or even in what's now, everyone was also. So you might ask, Im Kain, what's the chiddush? Shita. It's a mamash adavar another. What chiddush is it? I'm saying it should be like every other yard check, which is also. So where is there a chiddush? So Zok Ran, our Gemara is a little bit incomplete. And let's see the Ran inside. U'mashayin de Shmuel hachi itmar amar Shmuel u'shenadar ba me'oisai hayoyin ve'elach kloimar shekol yimei echad the Shabbos she'avar alav shehen ki yom shemeis b'yavav nesra alav v'neder. Every year he made that neder. The chivin shekain le'matus le'mikma me'hacha. You can't extract and learn any chiddush from here. Haidina, this halacha of the ikrei kamafis. Haidina v'lemer tahach rebusach shminan. There are no days that can be identified as this day that there was heterin, because he made another every single day. Our sugi is cut off. It's missing. Really, there should be a longer block today. The like Piras Hashas, because the Gemara didn't for us, Im Kain, my also lashmina. What is the chiddush? I'm being matbis in the davar another. There's no chiddush here. Elasamich loya sugyon, the reish perik, shavuos shtayim basra. Our Gemara is relying that we'll eventually get to it, Masechah Shavuos, and then we'll know what the chiddush of this halacha of Shmuel was. The Amin Hazam, Hai Lishne Mamish, the Amar Shmuel, V'hu Shenadar Uba, Me'oisa Yoim. So that's what the Gemara said there. Uvasar Achi Makshe, and later on, the Gemara there in Shavuos asks, Kivan, or Kiyoim Shemeis Be'aviv, Pshita, Umitaretz, and the Gemara answered, you're right. There is no chiddush in the Kiyoim Shemeis Be'aviv. But you know where there's a chiddush? In the Yoim Shenerek Boy Gedalia ben Achicham is Trichalei. Umakshinan Hanami Pshita. That's also bullshit. If there was another every day. Zakma the Tema, Kivan Dafilu Loy Nother. Even had you not answered the day of Gedalia, Asur Midirabanon, it would have been Asur Midirabanon because there's a tinus on that day. So therefore, Ki Nother Nami Loy Chayal Nidra, Volimatus Benetherhu. Yes, you made your own nether. But Lamaisa, there's a Durabanon, you have to fast on that day. So that when you chap on that day, even though there's a nether on it, but you're not calling matras the nether because of the Isser Durabanon, which makes it considered being matras. Isser, Kamash Malam, Kach Nira Be'enai. That's what I think is Pshat.
I was thinking, so I was thinking that maybe he's making a neder on Rosh Hashanah, but Rosh Hashanah is really the day of Shabbat.
I hear.
This is the Yom Tanis shell.
I hear. I hear. It's a good horror. There's a big shail about this. This is told in a big machlokes rishonim, because there's a machlokes rishonim if Evi Derabanan is deraisa. The Rambam holds that Evi Derabanan is a deraisa because it's a saucer. So if Evi Derabanan is a deraisa, so then you can't say your nether will be. How could your nether be chal? How could your nether not to eat bichal if there's an issue deraisa already on it?
Because first, Grad on this still isn't shalom because it's a asachat killed it because it's a nitche. So isn't it like?
Well, it's not. It's the day we were sacking it on that day.
No,
I hear. Okay. Inami, but that's the shal. I understand. Inami, sover hachsugi. Maybe the sugi holds the apagab the loy domi lekarbon she'aser lekoil. Even though it could be the chiddush of not only Gedalia but all these cases is the nether that was already on these days was not an Isser Hashava B'Koil. When I'm being matvis in a carbon, I'm being matvis in a davar another that's usher to everybody. A carbon's usher to everybody. But when I'm being matvis in a prior nether that I made, so the original nether that I'm being matvis is also something that's only usher to me. So the Avagav the Dami the carbon Joshua Koil, the Haloi usher Ela day, Afiluhachi matvis b'davar another mikri. Zoktirat umi maskada the sugyon the Shavuos from the end of the sugyon Shavuos Ma'inan we learn. If you make a nether on Vina of Nochim, Ustam Yenon, the Shemesh Shogid, the hit was ben, the Matis Beneder have a Va'oser. Even though it's an abundance called Matis. Okay, let's see the Heilige Gemara Vayzer.
Again, if somebody is Matis on Vina's Akin,
which is a Isser Durabanan, so it's going to be Matis B'davar Hanoder.
Why?
Because it's only Asr Midrabanan, and could be that's called B'davar Hanoder. It could be if it's also with the rabbanon, it's considered davar another. There's such a tzad, just what it says. Because it could be since the rabbanon made the issue, that's called a davar another. Davar also means it's also with the raisa.
Aber was heißt Dover Nuda? Ich kann Leute sagen, that what, that I won't eat.
Well, look, I don't know the Gemara there, but let's just look at the Umaskana the Sigan Shvuah Shmin Lenoida Mikvin Shanochim. If you want to answer yourself, you want to make a neder to prohibit yourself from eating Givin Shanochim, right? And the hit this behind. So first you made a neder, you're not going to eat Givin Shanochim, and then you were matvis on it. Then you said something else should be also for me, just like the Givin Shanochim. It's considered matvis beneder. I guess because you already made another, because of your, because not because of the Rabban, because of your nether. So that's similar to here. Okay, so let's see the Gemara weiter. Noch a case. Zog the Gemara weiter.
I'm going to arrive that
It's not a top of another. That's right. But you can make another on it. Amar Bina, Tashma. Okay, we got to go weiter. It's 8:36. Amar Bina, Tashma. Kechalas arnu trumosai. Someone said this kika should be aser just like chala or just like truma, mutter, because truma and chala are isurim. Just because you declare this as truma, you're not making the isur. You're just identifying this as truma. The isur comes from the Rebbeinu Shalom. The isur comes from the Shemayim. So that's not a davar another. So you can't be matfis in chala. You can't be matfis in truma. Haka trumas lachmei toida. But what if you said this should be also like trumas lachmei toida? What are lachmei toida? Those are the breads that are brought with the carbon toida, and well, katrumas lachmei toida would be the part that you took off that goes to the kahanim, which you're not allowed to eat. So that still remains with the Isser. That's a davar another, because the Kedusha of the Lachmei Toida comes from your nether. So it's much that would be Aser. The problem is, correct the Gemara, Vaha, however, Trumas Lachmei Toida, La'achar Zrikas Domini. When do you do the Trumas Lachmei Toida? After the Zrika, you take some of the Toida and you give it to the Kahanim. And after Zrika, there is no more Isser anymore. So if there's no more Isser anymore, then you have to say that the fact that you were matvis in Trumas Lachmei Toida and it's considered Isser, it must be that you're referring to the Iker before the Zrika Sadam. So you have a raya once again to the Rabbi Bacham and Shaila that when you're matvis in a Basar Shlomim after Zrika, you mean the Iker, you mean the Isser before the Zrika, and it would be another. Zok Gemara no ema ke Trumas Halishka Aser. Don't make a diak that truma is mutter, chala is mutter, but truma's toida is aser. No, truma's toida would also be mutter. Rather, make the diak that truma's halishka will be aser. Truma's halishka are mamish the coins that are designated to be karbonis. Ein lach davar another more than that.
A person could be himself with toida.
Sure.
Why? Isn't toida when the person goes?
Oh, so there's actually a shaila if you could be mechayv yourself a toida, even if you didn't have one of the four things.
The oilu, I know that you could.
Yeah, there's a shaila about it. Aval trumas lachmei toida, my mutter, would that be mutter? We're going to soon see tomorrow that even a chatos is called a davar another. So you have to say a rezu. I mean, actually, I shouldn't say that. So machloikas rishonim, why a chatos is considered a davar another. So a toida shouldn't be any worse. So I will trumas lachmei toida my mutter. Are you going to say utaka be mutter? In other words, you're going to say that in fact your matbis is on the now, not on the ikr. Well, then listen to me lachmei toida. So why did the Gemara chap on that? Why did the Brisa chap in the case of truma or of chala? It should have said a bigger chiddush. Even lachmei toida the choshik trumasai. So that's what the Gemara means. Hakamash malon trumas lachmei toida is trumasai. It's his truma, and it's not going to be good for another. That one shot. Trumasai. Here's want to see the round that trumasai. Kloimar b'chalal ucha trumasai. It's included in the ucha trumasai the katani. It's included in the trumasai that the Brisa listed. You should have a truma lagabi zorim, because lagabi zorim it's like truma, and that's the davar aser, not a davar another. The boy sema trumas lachmei toida. Who said maybe Trumas Lachmei Toida would taka be a good nether, but not Trumas Lachmei Toida after the Zrika. Maybe it was Trumas Lachmei Toida before the Zrika. If someone is matvis in Trumas Lachmei Toida before the Zrika, there it's taka davar another. So then it makes perfect sense. The Baisema Trumas Lachmei Toida nami kodim Zrikas damavu. Now the simplest case of Trumas Lachmei Toida kodim Zrikas damavu is very simple. You had your 40 breads, right? 10 of chametz, 30 of matzah. Before the zrika, you said my kikar should be like that from Lachmi Toida. But the Gemara has a more interesting case because it leads into a Gemara that shows that you could have the frosha before the zrika. Kegoin da frishinu belisha. Sometimes you could make that frosha of the Trumas Lachmi Toida even when it's still dough. About it, we don't need that to understand our Gemara. We just need a case where it's before the zrika. But since we had a brisa or we had a Gemara talking about it, the Gemara references that as an example of where you're being mafresh the truma of the lechamim even when they're still dough. What happens if instead of having 40 chalas, you have 10 of each min, you baked one big bread of each min? Yotza, you'll be yotza the mitzvah of carbon toida. I boksiv arboim. Lemaisa, the Torah does say it should be arboim. So it's more the mitzvah. That's the mitzvah to do it. But if you don't do it that way, it's not ma'akiv. The carbon is still kosher. Fact, Gemara about boil mishkal truma. You have to take a piece off. Right? How do you take a piece off? The chitema the shakal chader rifta akulam. Let's say you have 4 breads and you took one for everybody. But nan, the Mishnah says it doesn't work. It says echod mikol carbon shelo yito mikarbon al chaveiroi. You can't take from one type of bread on the other type of bread. The chitema the shakal prusa mikol chad v'chad. And if you're going to say you cut off a piece of each of those big breads, but nan echod. What we learn from there, shelo yito prusa. You don't have to take a broken piece of bread. It has to be a ganza bilka. Ella must be dafreshinu belisha. The shakal chadam echometz. You had a big dough of chametz and you took off a piece and you baked it after it was hofrash, and now it's a complete bread. The chadam in chalois, the chadam in rikikin, the chada min revucha. That's how it could have been done.
It's really gemacht vier. He made 4 pieces. He broke off a shtuko
from each one.
So now in the mass it's a God said because the mass he has 8. Not.
Okay, sure. Very good. So there's a very interesting ha'ara on this. There's the carbon toida is allowed to be eaten in the least amount of time that you find a carbon could be eaten. A shlomim could be eaten the day that you brought it, the night afterwards, and the next day. A toida, which is so much more food than the shlomim, because it's a full shlomim plus it's 40 big breads, that we have so much less time to eat. How does that make sense? Shouldn't you have at least the same amount of time as the shlomim? So Rabbi Raza spoke up from somebody, I don't remember who, is the whole purpose of a toida is that you want to be mefarsim the nice and the chesadim and your akars toiv to the Rebbeinu Shalom. So you're forced to invite a huge olim to celebrate your Suda Saidah. So that's why the rules of the carbon toida is there has to be a lot of food and very little time to eat it. So because of that, you're going to have a big olim in your Suda Saidah. Zog to Gemara weiter.
He's just supposed to say, I need to point to Shalai and the top.
Every day there was a party. It was gewaltig. And that's the way it was. Right? It's brought down. When they eaten, even when they eaten left being on the regal, they left their extra mashisheni money there.
That's why.
Yeah, but you have to understand. So 2-way street, there are people complained that it was very crowded and noisy in Yerushalayim. We learned but there's malice to it. Every neighborhood has advantages and disadvantages. Let's say that this shaila, if you say that when you're matvish, you're going bust with the original isser or bust with the status quo right now, the Basher Shom is totally a machlokes tanoim. What if someone said, Harei alai kibachar? I'm making this kikar also to me like a bechar. Rabbi Yaakov Oyser, Rabbi Yaakov holds that's a good nether. You're being matvish b'davar another. Rabbi Yehuda matter, and Rabbi Yehuda holds that it's not considered a good nether. So hechedami, let's try to understand with clarity what the case was. If he spoke out, this kikar should be to me like a bechar is before it's zrika. Well, then my time of demand is shori. Why in the world should that be mutter? It's referring to a davar, the isser of a davar another. The ila achar zrika stamim. And if you spoke out that I want this kikar to be like a bechor after zrika, where there's no more iser, then my time I demand the aser. Elalav, let's say that the case is similar to our very discussion of Rabbi Bachama. The machis basar bechor umachas basar the heich kabeh. There's two pieces of meat standing side by side, and it's after the zrika already, just like the case of the shlamim where Rami Bar Chama was clearing. V'amar zekazeh utnai, and therefore it would be a machloikis tanoim. The shaila of Rami Bar Chama is actually told in the machloikis tanoim.
If you mark this, what do you?
That's right. Now, Bechor is very different because Bechor automatically becomes a Bechor, but you have to declare it as a Bechor. So that will lead us into a whole new Shiloh. I believe you didn't say that, yeah. So let's see the Ran. If you said, I want to be matvis, this kikar should be osir, like a Bechor before Zrika, that's what the Mishnah means. Zokt, the Ran, I don't think so. Near Be'enai, the Bedin who the Gemara could even have asked, even if you didn't specify if it's before Zrika or after Zrika, you just said Bechor, that would also be also. The Gemara should have asked there, my time of demand the shari. Why? Why stama do we assume that it means aser? Tafil yamrinon the beter kamatvis kol she'omar stam beikra kamatvis. Whenever you don't clarify it, surely you mean to refer to the ikr, which is where it was aser. Datnan b'masnisin, because we learned in our very Mishnah chatos toida shlamim aser. And the Gemara doesn't ask a kasha from Chatas Toida or Shlamim whether or not it was before the Zrika or after the Zrika. And we don't bring a raya from here that it's Basar Iker, the Be'ikr Kamatvis. Ella Adi the Boila Meimar. So really, Bechar, if you say any carbon that you say stama, we assume it's the Isser and it's the Davar another. So why did our Gemara here say that you specified before the Zrika? It's not really accurate. And my time in demand osar, since on the other side of the coin, where you specified lachas rikas damim, there's a question of why it should be osar. Nokat nami ilif neis rikas damim, my time in demand shari, but really afilu avalhu adin distama nami kasha. So that takes us to the end of the sugya. We still have a couple more minutes, so let's see the Gemara's teretz to this raya. So we wanted to bring a raya from Bechor. That just like by Bechor, if you just point to a piece of Bechor after Zrika, there's a machlokes tanoim if you say it's a davar another, referring to the original history of the Bechor before the Zrika, or if it's referring to the current condition of the Bechor. So that is the same shayla as Rabbi Bar Chama, Dr. Marloi. The chula amal of neiz Zrikas damin. Everybody holds that it's beikra kamatvis. My time of demand is shari. If it's beikra kamatvis, so why would anybody hold that this is not a good neder if you're saying this kika should be usher like this bechar? Because Amar Krak Yidar Achi Yadar Bedavar another Lafuki Bechar Dedavar Asarhu. This Tana doesn't consider Bechar a davar another. This Tana considers Bechar a davar ha'asur because it's asur by itself. And Lamaita, that's the more mistaber way. A Bechar becomes asur from birth. A Bechar becomes asur from birth. Umand asur, so Oibezoi, let's flip it around. Why would you hold that being matnas and a Bechar could be an Isser? Because the Amar Kra, Lashem, L'Rabbeis Davar ha'asur. So it doesn't literally mean L'Rabbeis Davar ha'asur, because everybody holds you can't be matnas and Chazer. L'Rabbeis Davar ha'asur, L'Rabbeis, that this Bechar, we will consider it as something that you could be matnas on, even though it's a shtickle like a Davar ha'asur, it becomes asur by itself. Uman Deshari, and if you hold that it's not a good nether, Lashem my Abadai, what is he going to do with this extra word, Lashem? So it's telling you that if you were matras bechatas v'osham, bechatas v'osham, you're also b'chuyivin. So why should you say that chatas and osham it's called matras l'bedavar another, even though you have to bring it anyway, and the bechor you don't? Umal rois l'rabis chatas v'osham u'lahoitzias a bechor. Zok the Gemara marbani chatas v'osham shu matras b'neder, because your matras is in a nether, and we will soon see what that means. And I'll be Moiche Bechar, which is Kadosh Mimei Imoi. So let's see the Ram, because there's a Machlokes Ram and the Rambam. I hear. So let me stop a second. I'm going to go back to tomorrow because it's already 8:50, but I just want to hop around that little point. So here is where he says, Masha Enkin b'Bechor. So let's go back down to the bottom. B'Chadas v'Nosham. The Avagav the Choyva Alav, even though the Chadas v'Nosham, we also have to bring Lavion, they're still called Bikri Dover another. You know why? It's Femi B'Chor. But Vishamachmas Nidroi, who boyer Behemezu, Shu maybe. Sure, I'm a chayv to bring a Chadas. I'm a chayv to bring a Nosham. But there's no specific animal that I have to do it. I'm the one who put the Isser out to this specific animal. Masha Enkin b'Bechor, Shu Kodesh b'Me'imoi. The Bechor is Kodesh b'Me'imoi, then Yochel Achlifoi Bacher. Even though you might have to declare it, this Bechor is Kodesh Bechor, but Lamaisa, that was already picked. So therefore, it would not be considered Davar another, but a Chatas would be considered a Davar another. Okay, let's stop here and we'll be Mamshech tomorrow. Have a wonderful day. Once again, the broadcast today was sponsored by Benzi Bench, Lil Nishmis, our mother, Rachel Bas Lohim.
That's what we estimate today also?
Yeah.
We have a double with it.
Yeah.
Shkoyach,
Shkoyach,
Benzi, the 2 times.
Shkoyach.
And so